Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, once again, the resident movie lover himself, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to the main event. We are continuing the 2013 Bridgewater's Finest Movie Awards in conjunction with the Resident Movie Lover blog at residentmovielover.blogspot.ca, and it is time for the top 20 best movies of 2013. Now, this award is going to be presented in a special two-part video. The first part, which you're watching right now, is going to award movies number 20 through number 11. But before we get into the top 20, I wanted to take a second and toss some honorable mentions out there. These are movies that I probably rated somewhere between about a 75 to an 80, but just weren't quite good enough to make it onto the top 20 list. So honorable mentions in this award go out to Thor: The Dark World, Before Midnight, Oblivion, Only God Forgives, R.I.P.D., Warm Bodies, A Haunted House, Beautiful Creatures, The Hangover Part 3, and American Hustle. Again, none of the movies on that list were movies I disliked to any degree. Again, rating somewhere between a 75 or an 80 just wasn't quite enough to make it onto the top 20. But congratulations to those movies, all the same, for being really good movies. Alright, enough lead burying, let's get into this thing. Number 20 on my list of top 20 movies of 2013 is You're Next. Now, You're Next is a horror movie starring Sharni Vinson, Nicholas Tucci, and Barbara Crampton, and directed by Adam Wingard. In You're Next, the affluent Davidson family comes under attack during a family getaway, becoming the victims of a gang of masked killers. Now, You're Next is a modern take on the 80s slasher flicks, right down to the sometimes ADHD, sometimes brilliant, sometimes really unfitting musical choices. There's plenty of gore to be found here for those gore horror movie fans, and some really inspired and really excellent kills. Crossbows! Some of the best scenes in the movie actually take place in the neighboring house to the main house where the main bulk of the movie takes place. Or, as I like to think of it, for this group of wolf mask-wearing killers, it's the appetizer to the main course. Here you have truly top-notch horror movie execution, which really outweighs the probably simplistic motivations of the killers, the hit-or-miss visuals, and the really ambiguous backstory. At a rating of 80 out of 100, You're Next is my number 20 best movie of 2013. My number 19 best movie of 2013 is Two Guns. Now, Two Guns is a criminal action comedy starring Denzel Washington, Mark Wahlberg, and James Marsden, and directed by Baltasar Kormaker. Tonally speaking, Two Guns came off a lot like Safe House to me, although Two Guns as a whole comes off as a better movie to me than Safe House, which I find really ironic because that's another Denzel Washington-led crime drama starring a name white actor. Two Guns was extremely entertaining popcorn fare movie that doesn't try to be more than what it is. It's a gritty and quick-witted action comedy, doesn't try to be more than that, but succeeds really well at being that. The rating here was really pushed up based on the fact that there is endless chemistry between Denzel Washington and Mark Wahlberg. Every second that the two of them are on screen together is fantastic. Two Guns boasts an intriguing but I would call it familiar kind of storyline. It feels lived in. It feels like you've seen it before, but it's done really, really well. And it really does not disappoint despite the fact that I had high expectations and it came to me highly recommended. At a rating of 80 out of 100, Two Guns is my number 19 best movie of 2013. My number 18 best movie of 2013 is Don John. Now, Don John is a comedy starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Scarlett Johansson, and Julianne Moore, and is directed by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, his directorial debut. Now, in Don John, a dedicated New Jersey family man develops unrealistic expectations of love due to an obsession with pornography, and attempts to change his ways in search of meaning and true love. The movie boasts as much eye candy as I was hoping for, as I absolutely love Julianne Moore, and Scarlett Johansson is, well, Scarlett Johansson. So it's got as much eye candy as I was hoping for, and it was a really entertaining directorial debut from Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who shows himself to be a competent director. But at the same time, the movie wasn't perfect. I was hoping for some character development from Barbara, was the character played by Scarlett Johansson. There was really no development there whatsoever. She felt like a really wooden, kind of one-dimensional character. The dialogue, or I guess dialect, can really be trying sometimes, and I felt like the movie ended 8 to 10 minutes too early. As kind of an aside, I actually just pieced together the allegory of the name, like Don John equals Don Juan. I literally just pieced that together. And speaking of allegories, I can't get away from thinking that this whole movie is just an allegory for the one scene in the movie where Don John is talking about the scene in every porn video where they show the guy's face and it just instantly kills your boner. I keep feeling like this whole movie is an allegory for that specific scene. Even if I'm way off base on that, the movie was really entertaining nonetheless. At a rating of 80 out of 100, Don John is my number 18 best movie of 2013. My number 17 best movie of 2013 is 12 Years a Slave. I'm not going to win any fans for this one. 12 Years a Slave is a historical drama starring Chiwetel Ejiofor, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Michael Fassbender, and is directed by Steve McQueen. 12 Years a Slave tells the story of Solomon Northup, a black freeman from New York who is lured down to the South, captured, and sold into slavery, where he stays for 12 years before being set free. There's so much creative and technical brilliance to be found in the way 12 Years a Slave is presented and performed. Steve McQueen does a fantastic job presenting this story, as I mentioned, by giving him an honorable mention on Directors of the Year. The movie is filmed in a subtle and almost perfect way, and it makes great use of juxtaposition, which is something that really stood out to me when I watched it. A perfect example of that being the crying and screaming that was laid over top of Michael Fassbender preaching biblical verses. The juxtaposition there is fantastic. There's multiple instances of that in the movie. A lot of other reviewers have mentioned it, but the long-held, single-shot scenes of Ejiofor being hung from the tree, where he's standing on just his toes waiting for someone to come release him, are A, beautiful shots, but B, almost frightening. They're very intense, and it borders on frightening. Now, clearly I wasn't as overwhelmed with love for this movie as other people were, but I recognize the technical brilliance and the brilliance in the performances nonetheless. At a rating of 80 out of 100, 12 Years a Slave is my number 17 best movie of 2013. My number 16 best movie of 2013 is The World's End. The World's End is a sci-fi comedy starring Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and Pierce Brosnan, and is directed by Edgar Wright. In The World's End, 5 friends from childhood reunite to conquer the Golden Mile, a 12-pub crawl in their childhood hometown, culminating at the World's End pub, unwittingly becoming humanity's only chance for survival. The World's End here is a total victim of extremely high expectations. I mentioned this in a previous video. Based off of Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, the other 2 entries in the 3 Flavors Cornetto trilogy, it just had really high expectations that it didn't quite meet. But the movie was really entertaining and a lot of fun nonetheless. One thing I really loved about this movie was the allegory towards Moby Dick. And again, maybe this is just an allegory in my own head, but it's proof of how different people will view a movie differently. To me, the World's End pub, the pub at the end of the pub crawl, is Gary King's White Whale from Moby Dick. Gary King, the character that Simon Pegg plays. The World's End to him represents revenge in a way, but it also represents the release from the life that he's in right now, which is rehab and suicide attempts. It's pretty heavy for a comedy, right? I also feel like the ending of this movie has some kind of deeper meaning that I'm not necessarily 100% on, but it seems like a deeper meaning than just what you see on the screen. And if I'm on point with this, I don't think it reflects very well on an otherwise likable Gary character, but Even if I'm way off base on that, there's great dialogue in the movie. Edgar Wright has such a command of dialogue. Him and Simon Pegg both co-wrote the movie. Extremely entertaining. It's worth seeing even if you haven't seen Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, and why haven't you seen Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead? With a rating of 80 out of 100, The World's End is my number 16 best movie of 2013. My number 15 best movie of 2013 is Ender's Game. Now, Ender's Game is a sci-fi action-adventure starring Asa Butterfield, Harrison Ford, and Viola Davis, directed by Gavin Hood. In Ender's Game, we have the titular character Ender, who is an extremely gifted child prodigy, and he's sent away to an advanced military school in order to train for the impending alien invasion 70 years after the first invasion cripples humanity. Now, in my travels reading reviews for these movies, it seems like few other reviewers noticed the pacing problem with this movie. Like, you have a 2-hour movie and the source material is under 400 pages, and yet I felt like the movie was rushed. I just felt like everything was happening very fast. Tonally, to me, it didn't make sense, but we hit 2 hours and it still felt like it was very fast-paced. Not a lot of people seemed to pick that up. Despite what I felt were pacing issues, the performances in this movie, especially Asa Butterfield as Ender, as well as Haley Steinfeld, a lot of the kids, Harrison Ford, of course, is great, Viola Davis is great, everyone in this movie is fantastic. And the theme of war morality is a little transparent, but at the same time is very skillfully displayed, and the direction and the writing make it done very well. So while it is a little transparent, you know what you're going into as soon as you walk in, it's still executed very well. With a rating of 80 out of 100, Ender's Game is my number 15 best movie of 2013. My number 14 best movie of 2013 is Side Effects. Now, Side Effects is a criminal suspense thriller starring Jude Law, Rooney Mara, and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and is directed by Steven Soderbergh. In Side Effects, a woman turns to prescription drugs to handle the anxiety over her husband's impending release from prison, as he was imprisoned for insider trading. Prescription drugs, which turn out to have unexpected side effects. Side Effects really feels like two movies in one. Like, the first movie is very weighty and dramatic. By first movie, I mean the first half is weighty and dramatic, and it's a slow build. Whereas the second half of the movie, it gets more into the suspense and the thriller aspect of it. The first half of the movie has this really interesting kind of subtext, if you want to call it, about the legal conundrum surrounding intent. As in, if someone is under the influence of X, was their intent really to do what they did? But overall, as a whole, Side Effects has this great slow pace and this great tone throughout the whole movie. And it has an original music score which is worth the price of admission all on its own. The performances in Side Effect were pitch perfect as well, with particular nod to Jude Law and Rooney Mara, who were both phenomenal, and it boasts a mostly satisfying but mainly unpredictable ending. With a rating of 80 out of 100, Side Effects is my number 14 best movie of 2013. My number 13 best movie of 2013 and the best of the 80 rated movies is Iron Man 3. Now, Iron Man 3 is a sci-fi action movie starring Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, and Don Cheadle, and was directed by Shane Black. Now, in Iron Man 3, Tony Stark's ego leads to his whole world being destroyed by the Mandarin, which forces him to start over, deal with his issues from what happened in New York, and seek retribution. Just before we get into it, to quickly compare Iron Man 3 to the first two Iron Man movies, it wasn't the first one, but then again, it doesn't have to be. I thought the first one was probably one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen. And it wasn't the second one, but in that case, it's actually a good thing, because I felt it was better than the second movie by a good clip. Iron Man 3 shows a level of vulnerability in Tony Stark that we've never seen before, which I thought was a welcomed change of pace in the series. And I also really appreciated the added role that Pepper Potts has in the context of the whole movie. She essentially is the one that saves everyone. The villain here is very good, and despite the minor silliness of going on TV and telling the villain what your home address is, like that almost torpedoed it and knocked it down, but it's minor ultimately. The performances, especially the performance of Ben Kingsley, were fantastic. Ben Kingsley owns this movie from a comedic standpoint. Iron Man 3 is spirited, very entertaining, and Iron Man definitely stands as my favorite of the Avengers offshoot series of movies. At a rating of 80 out of 100, Iron Man 3 is my number 13 best movie of 2013. My number 12 best movie of 2013 is Stoker. Now, Stoker is a dramatic thriller starring Mia Wachowski, Nicole Kidman, and Matthew Good, and is directed by Chan-wook Park. In Stoker, India Stoker's Uncle Charles moves in with her and her depressed mother after the mysterious death of India's father. And as India continues to grow suspicious of her uncle, her infatuation with him grows as well. India is a very, very, very well-crafted character, and of course, Mia Wachowski's portrayal is top-notch, as I mentioned in my Best Actresses of 2013. But let's get into the movie itself. The movie itself is stylish and abstract, and it tries to say a lot more with atmosphere and tone than it does with words in a lot of cases. Stoker has an extremely well-crafted 3+ person universe. It's very slow built. There is intense sexual tension built throughout the entire movie, of course culminating in the shower scene. And you can't ask for any more from an artistic standpoint. It's borderline spectacular direction from Chan-wook Park, as we mentioned before. The symbolism is great in the movie. The artistic vision is fantastic. At a rating of 85 out of 100, Stoker is my number 12 best movie of 2013. And to finish off part 1 of this video, my number 11 best movie of 2013 is Blue is the Warmest Color. Now, Blue is the Warmest Color is a French drama starring Adèle Exarchopoulos, Léa Seydoux, and Jeremy Lehurt, and is directed by Abdel Kashish. That was 4 back-to-back very hard to pronounce names. In Blue is the Warmest Color, 15-year-old Adèle is searching for the love of her life. But things are turned upside down upon a chance meeting with a blue-haired girl named Emma, who will irrevocably change Adèle's life. Like Stoker, Blue is the Warmest Color is one of the most passionate and one of the sexiest movies I've ever seen in my life, and it's done with purpose. Unlike in a movie like Room in Rome, which I've talked about on a previous award show, where the sexuality was completely superficial and pointless, here the sexuality between Adèle and Emma is a character unto itself. So it's done with purpose and it's done with meaning. Blue is the Warmest Color is beautifully crafted under expert hands and is thoroughly human in both comfortable and uncomfortable ways, and the commanding performance of Adèle Exarchopoulos just propels the movie through its 3-hour runtime, which some people complained about. But as far as I'm concerned, it easily survives both its runtime and its over-the-top sex scenes, which a lot of people also criticized the movie for. I'd like to just take a moment to note that over-the-top does not necessarily equal unrealistic. Does it look like a porno? Sure, it looks like a porno, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's unrealistic. And just to finish it off, there's tons of arguments online about the male gaze in this movie, and what I mean by that is the fact that it's a movie about 2 lesbians that involve over-the-top and elongated lesbian sex scenes that were in fact created and filmed by a man. The argument, of course, taking away from the movie's realism because, oh look, a man did it. Which is about as sexist a thing to say as some strong feminists would argue against. As far as I'm concerned, if you actually watch the movie and pay attention to the movie, the arguments about the male gaze are hot air, because the movie very, very carefully crafts this relationship, where the relationship is not just about the sex that happens. I feel like I'm on a bit of a soapbox here, but I can't stand when people toss these hot air arguments at a piece of art, which is fantastic. At a rating of 85 out of 100, Blue is the Warmest Color is my number 11 best movie of 2013. So that's going to do it for this half of the video. You're going to want to come back later today where we're going to talk about movies number 10 to number 1 on my list of top 20 best movies of 2013. Thank you very much for checking out this video. We're going to see you on the next one. That's it for me for now. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. And this is the 2013 Bridgewater's Finest Movie Awards in conjunction and co-promoted with the Resident Movie Lover blog at residentmovielover.blogspot.ca. We'll see you next time.